All right, Scott Fike. Super excited to have you on the show. Is it a show? I guess it's a show.
It's a
Have you
show.
on this thing that I'm going to post on LinkedIn. And you and I have been friends for a long time. We've been coworkers. You've been my boss. A lot of people may not know that. You will be linked down below here. They can connect with you. I want everybody who's listening here to definitely do that because I know you're out there helping people in transition from law enforcement career into corporate security. Your transition was very interesting. I'd like to say that I was there for some of it, and you've now gone and built yourself into a great career. I definitely want to touch on a lot of points here, but when your journey was in transition from the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, you were a SWAT guy, in fact, didn't just start one day when you said, I'm going to retire, I'm out, and then you got picked up and you're into corporate security. You started years and years before you ended up in the Bay Area. So in that transition, what helped you and what hurt you during that transition time?
Yeah, sure. And first, Scott, it's really great to see you. We have known each other for literally, we're coming up on a decade, which is hard for me to
Yeah.
believe. So I did work for the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police up until 2014. And my last assignment, I work in Special Operations Division, which is part of the Homeland Security Bureau. And from Tactical Patrol K-9 to Advanced Security for POTUS, FLOTUS, did all those cool things. It's cool while you're doing it the first 100 times, and then it becomes sort of a drag and uneventful. As you said, I probably at year 13, 14 with the police department, I started to realize that some of the things that I really wanted to do, some of the relationship building, some of the excitement, some of the innovation, and especially the innovation part was really lacking. I mean, law enforcement doesn't generally lead innovation. They're generally stuck in sort of an environment of this is how we've always done it. And frankly, I started to get a little bored in my career. And so I thought to myself, what would the next thing look like? What is it that I'm looking to do? How do I get there? And so frankly, I just like many others that you've already interviewed and many others that I talk to even today, start on LinkedIn. I mean, it's a great platform to kind of sniff around, see what opportunities are out there. And frankly, what I did for approximately 2 years was I looked around on LinkedIn to determine what job descriptions excited me, what companies were some of these jobs being posted from, and what was it about those companies that I felt was exciting and innovative. Like I wanted to be somewhere that was, helping advance the world through technology, helping create the future. And so that means Silicon Valley. So I started my efforts in and around the heavy players that we all know, Google, Facebook, VMware, Salesforce. And the reality is through networking, simple networking, sending people messages just like you, like Wes Bull, because frankly, two of you are have been amazing friends, peers, mentors. And that was really the front end of the journey. Now, what wasn't exciting or fun was that I had an appetite for now. I wanted it now. I wanted to apply to some of these jobs. I wanted to make sure, that like everyone else, there's only so many of these jobs. It sounds exciting. I want to do it. But what I realized was I needed to slow down because moving from a law enforcement capacity into, the corporate private sector is not an easy transition. Roles and responsibilities do not align similarly. The way we talk, the way we look, the way we act. It's a lot of sort of a draconian, authoritarian environment in law enforcement. If this, then that. And so, the corporate environment, and even though there's policies and there's rules and there's regulations, there's also yellow and green and blue and purple. Everything is not black and white. And so I spent literally 2 years networking, building relationships, asking a lot of questions, frankly, hearing a lot of people tell me, Silicon Valley is a small environment. It's not going to be possible. You should just apply to San Jose Police or San Francisco Police if you want to be on the West Coast, and if you want to be in Silicon Valley, that'll get you here. And so that's not what I did. And so I started asking questions. I looked at peers, who are my peers today. Frankly, some of it's kind of funny because some of those people were the very ones that said this will never happen. And so it was through retooling myself, right? So it's just basic looking at a job description, something that excited me, understanding what were the gaps in my qualifications, or at least the perceived gaps, right? Because a lot of times it's not as though when I worked in police work, law enforcement, that I didn't have transferable skills. It was just the language. It was how we presented ourselves and how the companies presented requirements. They weren't aligned. So I used retooling quite literally. I needed to speak to people to say, look, you were a police lieutenant. You worked for this police department. You're now the head of, security for Square. How did you do that? And so through basic conversations, it's align skill sets with your passions, and passions is key. And if you identify those skill sets and you actually have passions and there's excitement around where you're headed, you can get there. You can transition. But Scott, frankly, you and I both know that at times, not everyone can transition. Not everyone is right for corporate security. It's just not the environment, right? You've seen this, yeah?
Yeah, we've experienced that. Agreed, and I think it's expectation. We were talking before we started recording. People tend to come out of law enforcement and are like, okay, I'm out in the private sector. Everybody's going to want me. I'm going to have to fend off all these offers, and that's because they think that the skill that they've been practicing for 20 or 30 years directly will translate. Because of course, every business wants a gun-toting street cop. And what we found out, we worked it together, that wasn't the case at all. And that mentality didn't serve them well. Do you think that as you were coming out, what were the skills, because you came out of that K-9 Special Operations background, what skills there could you pull on to say, yeah, this is something I can take and kind of retool it and then apply it? Because you came out and you immediately took on leadership roles, first in contract, and we'll get to that, and then in-house leadership roles. Were you thinking about it in those terms that like, this is what I learned as an operator, and this is what I can, and how I can apply it in the private sector?
Yeah, really, and this is where people should really focus, is that you have to establish relationships to establish trust, right? People need to be able to trust us. We're responsible for critical elements of their business. We're charged with keeping the mass population, the enterprise, safe and secure. And so it's really building trust. Although we have a reputation in law enforcement, potentially, right? Positive attributes, right? The folks that are reviewing resumes and making decisions around who we're going to call and who's going to interview, that's hard to convey off a piece of paper. And so I say, you need to build relationships out there so that we know who we can plug in or who can be plugged into certain roles. And for me, it was all about ensuring my integrity. It's about, being honest and upfront and transparent. Here's what I know and here's what I don't know. But here's what I think. And then having mentors, having a mentor. There's a long list of names I could rattle off right now, but Wes Bull, George McCloskey, Carlos Galvez, Derek Hernandez, Jill Jones. These are a lot of people who have, these are people who have successfully transitioned out. And, instead of trying to do it with a hammer and a chisel on my own, I wanted to meet with others and find out, well, how did you do it? What were your pain points? Which is why I was so excited when you asked for me to see if I would participate here. I've been watching you do this now for months, and I absolutely would say yes, because I think that we can, as leaders, as security practitioners, as professionals, as life experience, we can help those retool, rebrand. Scott, you and I actually set up mock interviews for a couple people. I think one in particular who is his career has done great things, from Google to now EA. He leads intelligence and investigations at Electronic Arts. And so these are the things that have to be done. You have to put in what you expect to get out. And I spent, as you said, and I spent roughly 2 years, sharpening my pencil before I left law enforcement. I didn't wait until it was my last day or my last week. I looked at my education against what some of the requirements were and realized that I was lacking core educational competencies. Not that somehow I was going to be a better person, but the reality is most organizations are looking for talent that have proven themselves in an academic environment, because there are learnings there. And so I literally had to do all those things: education, retooling, rebranding,
Yeah.
build relationships. And to this day, those relationships stand. I mean, you and I are here
Yeah.
now, and I still regularly call some of these folks. Um, so on the front would be, have a high level of integrity and honesty, show up looking for a mentor and be honest. What is it that you love? What is it that you hate? What is it that you don't know how to do? I mean, a lot of people don't even know how to put the PowerPoint together. I mean, basic presentation skills are not something that you do with a badge, a gun, and a set of handcuffs. It's just
That's
not
true.
usually something we focus on, but it's something that we do daily as leaders in safety and security. We need to get with our stakeholders, and these are things that I did not have a lot of experience in, and I learned the hard way, learned by fire under some situations. You were there as I was trying to create budget requirements at one of the biggest tech companies now, NVIDIA, that grew from about 7,000 employees when I was there. I think they're hovering around 40 or 50,000 now.
Oh my gosh.
7 years later, I know, it's nuts.
Yeah.
But what about you? Is there something I missed? Because you were there. Like I said,
No,
I remember because you had just come out of your,
yeah,
you had just
we
done your
met
journey.
pretty quickly after I transitioned, and the thing that I think was interesting to me is because when I distinctly remember when Wes and I were having lunch with you one day, someplace near NVIDIA across the street, and you were adamant about we wanted to figure out how can we work with you. And you were adamant about, guys, I'm trying to get my degree. And me and Wes were like, this crazy person. We're trying to offer him, all this opportunity, and you were adamant. And so is that something that you obviously identified, hey, these are the gaps in my experience, this is what I need to do. Was that because you had aspirations to do something more than what you were doing or what you had done in the government? You had aspirations to be a leader and be, not that you weren't a leader in the government, but or in police work, but did you have aspirations to say, I want to be the head of security somewhere, and this is the path that I need to be on? Because you were unbudgeable. We couldn't, really.
I remember that because you guys were like, we really ain't inside. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing it. And so, yeah, here's the deal. Education is important, and it's something that, I heard, growing up. And unfortunately, I wasn't someone that came from a lot of money or access. And so I needed to start out a career, and I needed to work, and I needed to pay my way through school. And so I had a lot of stop starts during undergrad. And so by the time I was, getting ready to leave police work, I was so close. I was like so close. And a lot of times companies set qualifications that basic undergraduate degree is a requirement. And so I was determined that I would meet the qualification requirements because, yes, I did want to land in tech. I was super excited to be in tech. It's just fast-paced and innovative. And then once I got the itch, the academic itch, as you might recall, I decided to continue on and work towards an MBA while I don't remember if I was yet the head of global security for NVIDIA yet, or if I was.
Yep,
I was on the way. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was literally working on, a master's degree while struggling to help scale a security program for a company that was really growing itself. And so my thing is this: education is sometimes arbitrary, but again, it shows that you've been able to put your head down, you've been committed, and you started something and you finished.
Yeah.
You started and you finished. And, I figured if I had the degree, the requirements, I'm incredibly passionate about security. I installed my first security system when I was about 12 years old in my parents' house.
Yeah.
And then through high school, I was installing security systems in my friends' parents' houses. The deal was you pay for the equipment and then I'll install it for free. And that's how I started. I mean, and so I've literally spent the better half of 25 years loving every bit of anything risk related, technology related, investigations. And so I thought that it made sense for me to work in a capacity in the security domain. Initially, again, I wasn't exactly sure, but then when I met people like you, other leaders, I was like, yep, this is it. Because the camaraderie's there.
Yeah.
There's service excellence requirements, all the things that I love. I mean, so it made sense.
Yeah, I just think, a lot of people, when they come into the private sector, they don't really know what's out there. And they are like, well, let's just test the waters and I'll see and I'll ask and I'll talk to people. You did, but I think you had more than anybody I've known had a focus on what you wanted to do and what you wanted to go after. When for those who maybe aren't read in, when you made your transition to the private sector, you worked in a contract role, and I've talked with a lot of other people, the folks in the contract world who talk about that as being a good entry way into what we call an in-house position, or somebody who's
Yep.
employed as a security professional by a big company. And do you think that helped you in that transition, and you learned from a lot of those? I mean, the stories that you've told me with your first transition story are things that I do to this day. What you taught me are things that I do to this day with when I'm working in a group setting. So that helped you. Obviously, you're shaking your head. So tell us more about
100%.
that. What
Yeah.
about that helped you? Did you felt like that was the right place to go, or what was it about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, Scott, a lot of times in this environment, it's not necessarily who you know, but who knows you, right? And it's about, again, the trust, credibility, and to come in a contract role, it was about, look, this is not a permanent marriage. We can test this out. If I'm not the right person for the organization, then that'll flush itself out. We'll come to that conclusion together. But guess what? What if along the way, during this relationship as a contractor, a consultant, if you will, I'm able to build relationships within the organization and help advance the program in ways that I otherwise didn't have the experience on paper, right? So if someone who's interviewing me is looking for core competencies in corporate security or a corporate environment, frankly, I didn't have them, right? And so I needed to figure out a way to get them, to get some creds, to get some credentials under my belt in Silicon Valley, because that's where I chose. Now, some people might love transportation and they want to get into aviation or maritime or something else, because safety and security is everywhere, right? And so I would highly recommend that if you have an opportunity to join a reputable service industry or service provider, if you will, that you do it, and then you pick up assignments with a client, if you will, and then you can do the sniff test and you can date in a certain way, so that if that organization is not for you, you haven't done your first transition and then possibly failed. And failed doesn't mean like, it was your fault, but failed means is that you weren't able to actually come in, sustain time. There were parts of something, and because maybe that's your first opportunity, it doesn't bode well. It doesn't look right. And so for me, it worked out incredibly well. I mean, God, it was so much fun. I still,
Right.
to this day, and as a contractor or consultant, I was able to offer a service, and if the client or the person up the other end paying didn't want it, that was fine. But I still got paid, and I was excited and having fun, and I did learn. I mean, I did absolutely learn 100% what the inner workings of a private sector company looks like. There's all these different stakeholders that I hadn't really thought of before. Like, well, what the hell does that have to do with safety or security? Well, it has everything to
A
do.
lot.
Food
Yeah.
service, IT. I mean, all these different stakeholders are things that we must consider.
And it's a
And
safe way for them to, or the company, your client, to really get an understanding of who you are, what's that brand, how does this
that's
person
right.
work. It's like dating. I think you made that comment earlier. I think it's a great analogy. And there's a lot less risk, because what we always talk
Yeah,
about is that the most risky thing any company can do is hire a human being to do a job, right?
yeah,
So they really got to know, like, you're the right person, because we do see, it wasn't in your experience until you came to us at NVIDIA, but we do see where company will try somebody out in a contract role and then they'll in-house them. I mean, that's what we did with you at NVIDIA, and we had a great
yep,
opportunity to bring you on board as senior manager, and then you became the director and so on. So I am a big proponent of that as well. Good, I think that's what we can give back to the folks that are watching, is don't discount those roles. Sure,
no,
you're not going to make as much money, let's say, or have as much stock, and that's really a very tech-centric view, I understand. But I think we have more opportunities in the contract world to do that transition and to learn. So
yeah.
with that, we'll hold there. But when we come back, let's talk about leadership, because I know that's something that's close to, very passionate about it. You taught me a ton about leadership, and I want to try to understand your growth as a leader through the private sector. So, folks, stay tuned. Make sure you're sharing this with your partners. Make sure you're commenting below. Ask Scott and I questions. If we miss something, let us know. We're happy to answer that. We're both active on LinkedIn, and stay tuned.